All right, video number 5. So now we're ready to drop some content into this thing. We've pretty much got everything set up the way that we want in terms of our infrastructure, basically. So if we go back to our template that we're referencing, we can start to see how this content is laid out. And so I'm just going to run through and basically generate this thing. So what I've done is put everything in a folder. So if I go to my desktop, I've kind of made this content folder where I've got all of these images so I don't have to go hunting through my different library to find them. But I'm just going to start dropping content in, and you could feel free to speed through or not even really watch this video if you're already comfortable with dropping graphics into InDesign and sort of scaling and pushing things around, or you could just watch part of it. I'm just going to run through and create all of the pages. There's not that many, so it shouldn't really take that long. But it might be helpful if there's little tips and tricks that you haven't necessarily picked up yet. So, okay, so first things first, we will start with this first project, which is the coffee dripper. So what we need is, first of all, to drop in this image on the right. And you can see that a lot of the text here is just filler text, right? This is just like generic lorem ipsum filler text, except for some of the, stuff that stands out. And that's what we'll do. I'm not going to sit here and try to write the project story out. But okay, so first thing we need this image. So I'm going to go to my new document, and I'm going to open up that folder of content and scroll through until I find the right image. Did I pass it? I feel like I passed it. Yeah. Okay. So all you need to do is drag and drop, right? Basically, and it loads your cursor with that image. So I'm going to click to select. And one thing that's good to sort of indicate is that InDesign does a favor for you, and it kind of it drops images in at their current size and resolution. And it allows you to see what that information is. So if I go over to my links panel, you can see this is the only image I've dropped into the document. So it's the only image that's shown here. But once I get this thing up and running, any image that I drop in will end up in this links panel because I'm linking to it. And it's important to reference that too. That's the way that InDesign is working. When you drop an image into InDesign, you're not actually adding that image to your file. So if you sent that file to your groupmate or something so that they could work on the project or the portfolio or whatever it might be, they're not going to have the files that are linked. And so the document's not really going to be workable for them. And it does that so that your file doesn't become really large with all this content that you've dropped in. So just understand that when you drop content into InDesign, right, unless it's text, or just graphics, like really simple things that you can create here, it's going to be referencing an image that exists elsewhere on your computer rather than actually just embedding that image into your file to keep things nice and light. So anyways, once you've got a link selected, you can scroll down here to link info, if I make this a little bigger. And we've got two important things. We've got actual PPI, which stands for pixels per inch, and we've got effective PPI, right? Now this image must have been exported at 300 pixels per inch, which is a standard setting for print. Basically, if you export an image and print it at 300 pixels per inch, pixels being the small little sort of increments that a raster-based image is composed of, if you've got 300 of those in 1 inch, you're going to have a pretty high resolution graphic that prints well on paper. The effective PPI is how I've manipulated that image in InDesign, right? So you can see that if I click the little center target there so that I'm editing the image, not the frame, and I scale this thing up an arbitrary amount and let go, you can see that my actual PPI remains at 300, right? Because that's the sort of native resolution of the file. But under effective PPI, it's taking into account how I've scaled the image, right? So since I've taken a 300 pixel per inch image and made it even smaller, I've increased the effective resolution, right? Meaning the resolution that it's going to be printed at. If I do the opposite, right? If I pull this thing back to where it was, and then I pull it, I'm going to zoom out. I try to zoom out. I actually just scaled the image down. If I pull this to be even larger, right? Let's say I make this thing really, really big. You can see now that my effective PPI is only 184 pixels per inch. That's not great. that means that when I go to print this thing, it's going to be at not a terrible resolution. I mean, 150 is kind of passable in some scenarios, but it's not going to be as nice and crisp as it originally was. So this is just to say that InDesign kind of does you the favor of showing you, if you use this links panel, what you've kind of stretched images out to be in terms of their effective resolution, which is a handy thing to keep an eye on. So again, just to reiterate, 300 pixels per inch is a good standard resolution if you want high quality images when you go to print them. Anything below that is going to be a reduced quality. 150 is kind of not terrible, but not great. Anything below that, you're starting to get pretty gnarly in terms of the resolution and degradation of the image quality. So it's good practice to take good high resolution photographs as just kind of standard practice when you're documenting things. Again, that's a nice reason to shoot RAW and use a real camera rather than your phone that has a high quality image sensor that's capable of producing large format, high resolution images, so that when you go to lay things out in documentation, you've got much more flexibility with resolution and quality. But anyways, all of this was just to say that you can follow this information along in that links panel. So I think what we want, first of all, is to, I'm going to undo to go back to my 300 pixel per inch version. And then what I'm going to do is just make the frame fit the page that I want this thing to fit on. So it should just take up the entire right-hand page. So I'm going to drag this margin until I get it to the center of the document. I'm going to drag this out to the bleed margin. Again, we want this to be a full bleed image. I kind of missed it there. Which means that we actually want to overprint it and then trim it back, right? So if we use our reference and we take off that preview mode, we can see that we're pulling this all the way to the edge of the bleed margin, not just the document page. And actually using that preview mode is a good sort of concept of what happens when you go to print, right? You're printing it outside the margin, and then you're trimming it back to the margin or to the page edge, right? So we want to do the same thing here. We want to make sure we pull to the bleed margin. So I'm going to drag that guy up, and then I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut that just centers the image within the frame. So again, I think everybody is up and running with this fact already, but anytime you're working with images in InDesign, you're working with both the image and the frame. So the frame is the thing highlighted in blue here, right? It's kind of like the cropping box around the actual image itself. And then if I click that target, it lets me select the actual image, right? And then you can see this other margin that's showing me where the boundaries of that image are. I can drag around and kind of move it. I can also click and hold, and then it gives me kind of this live preview that shows outside the frame kind of where this thing is, right? But if I use the shortcut Shift-Command-E, it just centers it, right? So it just says wherever this frame is and wherever the image is, just center the two so that I'm just looking at that exact. I hate that it does that. Yeah, so I'm just centering it automatically. I use that keyboard shortcut all the time. It's very handy. Command Option C makes your content fit to the frame, which in this, or sorry, the frame fit to the content, which is a good shortcut. Anytime you're kind of lost, you can just kind of reset and go back to the original sort of frame proportions if you use that Command Option C. So anyways, two shortcuts that are kind of handy. This is basically the size that I want. I want to keep this thing pretty large. It's at 300 pixels per inch, so I don't want to make it any larger. Otherwise, I might lose quality. But I'm just going to center it in the margins there a little bit. I'm going to use my arrow keys for that purpose. It looks like vertically it's pretty well centered. The handle kind of adds some thickness, so I think even though that dot's not vertically centered in the cup, we're pretty close. So I'm just going to use my keyboard to kind of nudge that to get the handle to sit right in the middle of that gutter. And I think we're pretty good. We've got that image where we want it. Now we've got to add some of the titling text for this page. If you go back to our reference document, we've got to add all this stuff. So first of all, for the page number, right, I'm just going to copy this. Copy, paste. It's not going to mess up our footers, right, because it's still just, this is now just referencing, again, this instance. So, right, as long as we don't change this, if we change this to 2, then our footers would update, right? So as long as we don't change it and we keep it at 1, we're good to go. So I'm just going to make sure that's in the top left corner of the document. The next thing we need to add is this text here. So I'm just going to, so we don't have to actually type it out, I'm going to copy this. This is just telling us how long the project was and some of the materials and processes that were involved in it. Adding little things like this, I think first, is someone really going to be, reading the nitty-gritty of your project and little details like this? Maybe, maybe not. But I think it helps to formulate your own thoughts and how you want to organize and what information you think is important. And it also just adds a little bit of variability to the page, right? So we're not just looking at, one kind of static hierarchy of type, but we've got some other textures in there as well. So a little bit of navigation and context of the project, but also just kind of a nice visual element. So I'm going to copy that text, go back to the document we're creating, and I'm going to drag out a new text box. And I'm not just going to paste it because it's going to bring in all those other styles, and then I'm going to have duplicate styles, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go to Edit, Paste without formatting, right? So this is just going to paste the text itself without any formatting applied to it and bring that into our document, and there we go. So now we need to add some formatting. So I'm going to open my paragraph styles, which we've already created in a previous video. And I'm going to go to the duration there, and I'm going to change that to descriptor because that's what it is. Same thing here for materials and processes. I'm going to change that to descriptor. And the rest of this is just body text. So it doesn't need to be, well, actually, yeah, it should already have the body style applied to it. So we just need to make sure that this is at the top of the page. We need to pull it into that gutter there and then pull it out to fit the column. You can also, instead of having to like resize things like this all the time, right? You could use your text frame options and set the auto size to height only, and you could anchor it to the top so that the top isn't going to change, but as you add more text or more layers, it's just going to automatically stretch down or upwards. So if I delete some of this stuff, it's going to snap up. You don't have to use those text frame options, and sometimes they can be a little clunky, and you might end up taking them off or something sometimes, but some situations they could be handy. Okay, so we've got our specifications, we've got our project number. We need our abstract, so our little blurb that somebody can read and understand kind of roughly what this project is about at a glance without spending much time at it. Right now we've got this big image of coffee, and we're going to have this blurb that explains the project in like one sentence. So again, at a 10-second glance, somebody's going to understand what we're trying to do rather than having to actually get down here and start to read this nitty-gritty text. So again, I'm just going to copy the information here, and then we will create a new text box. I will paste without any formatting. So we just have the text. It's automatically going to set to that body paragraph style because that's just what I have selected when nothing is selected. So it's automatically going to import everything as that style. But we want to change this to abstract so it gets nice and big. We want to pull it out to be the width of the column there. And then what we're going to do is use some of those auto settings. So we're going to go back to that text frame options box. I'm using Command B, which is the shortcut. But you could also just go into Object, and then it is Text Frame Options. So Command B is the shortcut. First thing we're going to do is auto size the height so that it just automatically shrinks and scales. We are going to do it from the center as opposed to the top because now this isn't just anchored to the top of the margin, it's just kind of floating in the middle. So it makes sense for it to expand and contract vertically from the center. But the other thing we're going to do is create some inset spacing. So we'll go back to general, and right now it's kind of weird that it's sort of this long block of text that goes all the way to the margins. I'd like it to be brought in a little bit and to just be a little bit closer to a more of a squarish shape rather than a long rectangle. So what I'm going to do is just start to increase the spacing here until I kind of get what I want. Actually, maybe, well, we'll just kind of keep going until we get something that looks nice. That's kind of awkward because we've got a long top and bottom, which is just kind of strange. This is actually kind of nice. So at 2.5 inches of inset, we get 4 lines that are kind of roughly equal in width, so we get more of a square shape. This is purely just me making this up on the fly. You could certainly apply a more rigorous logic to decisions like this. But obviously we want it to be centered, so instead of 2.5, I'm going to say divide by 2 to get us 1 1/4 inches, and then just do the same thing on the right-hand side. So we'll get that same spacing, but now it's centered. And I think that's what we want to do. So we'll hit OK. The other thing is to emphasize the project name, right? So that's what we've done in this sample. We've kind of called out and made bold the name of the actual object. So again, we're going to go to our character style that we created, which is going to be bold italic, to create that call out. And the nice thing about using character styles, just to reiterate, is that you can design in this change, and then let's say I wanted to make it different, right? And I didn't want to have to edit it on each project landing page. I could just change the character style and it will automatically update. And using character styles means that it's not going to read this as an error, right? It's not going to try to correct this from the paragraph style standpoint. It's just going to understand that it's a designed decision, not an arbitrary mistake. So we've got our abstract there. Now we need our body text. So I'm going to drag out a text box. I'm going to say, well, first maybe let's get it to be roughly the correct size. Then we're going to say type, fill with placeholder text. There we go. I don't really want just like a single sentence for the first paragraph, so I'm just going to kind of adjust this so that it looks somewhat realistic. Again, maybe we'll say this is 1 paragraph. We've got 3 paragraphs here. Okay. We want to first apply our opening paragraph so that we get that sort of bold top line of text. And that's a really long span for 1 line of body-sized text. Humans aren't really that great at reading super long lines, so the more you can kind of chop things up and use these 2 columns to divide the text, the more readable it becomes. So we need to add that column break, which is again found under our text frame option. So if we use Command B, we can open that box up again. And here we can add a column. So instead of a 1 column layout, we can say 2 columns, and we will make that gutter the exact same size as the gutter in our page layout, which is 3/8 of an inch. You can have it balance the columns. So sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's not. If we balance the columns, this actually works fine. We get kind of a nice equal layout. We don't have only 1 line up here. So depending on how your text is written and how many, where your paragraph breaks are, sometimes this is a little bit awkward. But to me, this looks fine visually. So I'll leave balance columns set. And then the last thing I might do is change auto size to, again, height only, and anchor it to the bottom so that if we did want to add and type in more text, this thing can just kind of magically stretch and not have to be resized. And then I'll copy that first line of text from our blurb here. And replace this paste without formatting. All right. And there we go. I think the last thing we might want to do is kind of center this blurb. Right now it was just kind of arbitrarily placed, so where do we want that to go? Ideally, we kind of center it between maybe the page number here and the body text. So what we can do is select all 3 of those things, go over to our align panel, and use that distribute spacing command to just kind of center that between that visual anchor and this visual anchor, and let go. And now if we enter our full screen preview mode, we've got our spread, right? So we've got our sort of higher level project information, our quick at a glance blurb, a nice big visual image, and then a little bit more detailed information about the project that helps to flesh out maybe the original concept. Let's see if we're missing anything. Yeah, we did have a caption here, right? So we should add that in. That's just some placeholder text. So we'll jump back to this page. We'll drag out another text box. We'll say type, fill with placeholder text, get it down to a reasonable amount. change the paragraph style to caption, which again gives us kind of that automatic indent so that it's not so long and it's a little bit more broken up. Fit that into the column, fit that into the column, and then again I would probably use that auto size command to just automatically snap the height and anchor it from the bottom. And to save time later, I can just copy and paste this caption and then replace the text so that I get that sort of auto sizing feature automatically without having to every single time type it in. I'm also noticing now, I mean, I noticed this before, but you know, this orange is a little bit brighter than the orange in our template that we're referencing, which makes it a little bit harder to read, especially on light backgrounds like this or somewhat darker backgrounds. So this is a good example of how now I can go to my swatches and double click that primary swatch. And maybe we'll just reference whatever this value was. 65, 115. So if I change this swatch now to 65 and then 15, so we're adding a little bit of black that kind of darkens the whole thing a little bit, and then I hit OK. Again, I was able to just make that change in, 5 seconds, and it just automatically updated this text, the numbers here. I mean, everywhere that this swatch was applied is just automatically updated and fixed. So again, you know, working in this flow where you're using swatches, you're using paragraph styles and character styles, you're using parent pages to kind of set up things. It's more work and it's a little bit more of a headache up front. And it's also, like we talked about, not something that just like happens, but, you know, sort of evolves as you're creating and designing something. But once you get comfortable using all those tools, it makes it way more easy and flexible to design and make changes on the fly. And in the long run, will save you quite a lot of time. Okay, let's see if we can kind of breeze through the rest of this. So we've got this sketch and then these 3 images on this page. So I will find those things in my Finder. So this is one of them. This is another. Yeah, and then that third one. And then we also have the sketch, so Dripper sketch. I'm going to drag all those into my page. Go 1, 2, 3, sketch. Center that, align it to the top. Pull in the boundaries and just kind of scale it up using that, you know, click and hold so you kind of get that preview. And now I'm roughly just going to scale this so that it kind of fits within the margins. And then I'm just going to drag this margin up until I get some kind of a snap that tells me I've reached the... Oh, actually I went too far. Usually you get a registration wherever you meet the edge of the image, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. Okay, these guys need to be a lot smaller, so I'm just going to take all 3 of them and align them up against the left margin there. And I'm just going to quickly scrunch them down and use Command Option E to just resize and refit them. I scaled them proportionally, so I didn't squash anything. You have to be careful about things like that. But let's see what size these were. So again, we created some quick guides here, but all of these are 2.875 wide. So if I just click height 2.875, I use my arrow keys to bump that up to the correct size. Arrow keys to bump that up to the correct size. Shortcuts align to the bottom, align to the top. I'll use my align panel to distribute the spacing, although this guy should just be center aligned on the page. Then I'm going to drag in so that they're all following the rules of that column. Now I'm just going to select everything and use Command-Shift-E to center all those images so that I have a little bit less work to do in terms of making sure that they fit to those. It really bothers me that InDesign does that. I'm trying to just zoom into the page, but when I'm hovering over the image, it scales the image, which is annoying to me. But anyways, So I'll scale these guys up. Maybe I can just make that guy even bigger. Same thing here. I'll scale this up to show that now this is kind of the pattern and this was the mold. Scale up to see some of the finishing techniques, carving out the edge of that cup. Cool, so we've got those 3 images. What else do we need to add here? We've got some body text and then 3 captions. So I am just going to copy this caption, paste, align to the bottom. I'm just going to quickly drop all these into place. I'm not going to make sure that they look vastly different. And then we need some body text over here. So I'm going to draw out a text box, go to type, fill with placeholder text, create a period. I'm going to auto size the height, snapping it to the bottom, and then just make sure that it's the correct width for the column. And we've got that page laid out. So we've got kind of one principal image off to the left here. Maybe the body text sort of continues the story from this first page. But then we've got some smaller images that maybe show a little bit of process, and each one has a caption associated with it to tell a little bit more detail. Let's see, the next page that we need to lay out is a nice big sketch on one side, and then these 4 smaller images in a grid on the other side. So we will find all of those images. Here's the sketch. I'm going to snap it, wrong side. Center it there. Pull these margins in to reference the correct edges. Pull that down to the bleed margin. Pull that down to the bleed margin. Center the image in there, and then I will scale it appropriately. Again, if I want to know what the resolution is, again, we're at 300, and I'm only going to scale this down, so we will be in a good place once this gets to its final dimensions. That looks fine. But you can see here we've got some dark pagination on a somewhat dark background, but also the orange little graphic there kind of gets lost in that gray background. So this might be a good candidate for a dark sort of parent page. And the nice thing is I can apply these parent pages to single pages. So I could still keep this as black text, right? But I could make this nice and light to contrast with that background. So I'm going to grab this spread dark parent page that we made in the last video and just drag it on top of that page that I'm working on. And you can see that it automatically updates that pagination and turns it white. And again, I think things like this are just nice details, right? Like it shows that we're thinking through the content. We're still trying to provide some navigational information in a nice subtle way, but we've actually considered that, you know, it's not always going to be readable depending on the color and texture of the background. So just kind of a nice overall touch. Now we need those 4 smaller images. This is one. Handle iterations, I believe this is one. Maybe this is one. We should probably go back and just reference. Yeah, so we've got 1, 2, 3. We need the 3D print picture. There you are. Oops. Accidentally just dropped it on top of the other image that I had already placed. So I'm going to undo and do that one more time and make sure I don't actually replace anything with it. Okay, so we need to do the same thing. Basically, I will take all of these images, select them all, align them up against that left margin, and then just scale them down to fit within. Sometimes things are too big to be able to actually reach, so you got to zoom out. Again, you can definitely feel free to breeze through this if it's just boring and redundant, but just for the sake of consistency, I'm just going to go through and lay all these pages out. Let's see, so the height of all these guys. They're just squares, so whatever the width of the column is going to be the width of the height. So I'm just going to copy the width, paste it. If you go to Object, Transform again individually, it's just going to take the last transformation, which was bumping that up to 3.375. Actually, I noticed that I screwed this up. I didn't quite get this pulled out to the margin. You got to be careful with stuff like that. This guy is also a culprit. But anyways, if I copy and paste, and then I just say, follow that same transformation. That one is already a square, so actually we're good. But anytime you're trying to repeat commands like that, you can just use that object, transform again individually, and it will just take that last number that you entered and just make it the same for the next image. So, okay, so we need to select both of these and make them on the top. We need to select these two, use our align tool to actually specify the spacing. So if you remember, this gutter here between the columns is 3/8 of an inch. So we also want the gap between these two images to be 3/8 of an inch. So I'll type 3/8 and it automatically converts it to a decimal for me. And then use that distribute spacing command to just get that gap. And now I can take these two images, anchor this one, and align to the top. And now everything is kind of in a happy place. Maybe these should be switched. And we just need to make sure that, first of all, we'll center everything, and then we'll just scale things down so they're not cropped in a really strange way. So that's fine. Again, if you click and hold for a second, you'll get to see a little preview before you commit and let go. That one seems fine. I want a preview for this one. I'd like to kind of get a few of these in there, so maybe we'll scale it so that we get a 3x3 section just showing those different. I hate you, InDesign. Yeah, actually that works fine. Okay, so now we've got this page laid out, and I think we had a caption there, so I'm just going to copy and paste, put it in there, and I think that looks fine. I think in the reference document it was kind of using that same 3/8 of an inch gap above that, but I think this format looks fine. Let's see, I am going to move this section divider down, which again, I missed it there. It's nice because again, that pagination is automatically updates. So before, this was referencing the section divider we just moved, but now it's going to auto update because it's still referencing back to this section divider and information. So the next page that we need to lay out is this process page about the tools and carving these prototypes. So we need to find those images. Which are probably up here. Yeah, that's one. That's two. And that's three. All right, so this first kind of master image is going to be centered in the spread, so I'm just going to use that keyboard shortcut. It's already basically the size that we kind of want it to be, so I'm just going to leave it, kind of position it a little bit, and then drag these, the bounding box down to our bleed margins, and drag this up to a certain level that looks okay. And then these two are going to be smaller images, so we will align to that left margin, shrink it down, shrink it down. Let's see, they're not square. I think basically what we did was, first we'll get them in their columns. probably just use that same dimension. So selecting both, anchoring the one that we want to stay still, and then using that distribute spacing command, and then just pulling down to get this full image. Then we can center it, drag it out to fill up that space, and then just do the same thing with this guy. We can align to the top to reference that sizing we just did. Pull out that image and make sure the bounding box is also stretched so it doesn't crop it. And then we've got the images laid out in that same way. Here we've got some body text that's running through this document again, maybe connecting, kind of skipping this page, but picking back up from where we left off. And then a smaller caption. So we might just, again, in the way that we've been working, I'm just going to steal this. Probably align it to the top edge here that we've already specified. Anytime you can sort of use existing geometry when you're laying things out, kind of helps to keep a nice sort of consistent line coming all the way across this spread where this caption is following that same threshold. Even though it's an arbitrary decision, right? We kind of just pulled this where we wanted it to stop and then fit these images below using a consistent spacing. It still helps to kind of keep a consistent horizontal alignment, even if it's across an entire spread. And then we'll steal the body text that we made earlier. So I'll align it to the bottom, and now we've got that page spread finished. And then this gets us to our final spread. So we've got sort of the final hero shot of this coffee dripper and mug with a little bit of process about how coffee is made. So if we go to our final spread here, we need to drop in the hero image, and this will be, full bleed. So we will center it within that page really quickly, drag up till we get to that bleed margin, drag over till we get to that bleed margin, drag over till we get to the center of our page. Command-Shift-E to center, and then we'll scale this guy until we get, I think that's about right. We've got a little bit of these coffee beans kind of flowing off the page here. And I think we also want to use, actually, so we made a decision here in the reference document. Since this is kind of the final closing page of our document, we made the decision to keep the pagination off of it. So we could do one of two things, right? We could either say, yeah, we want to support that decision and use our blank parent page to just get rid of that information and keep this nice and clean. Or we could say, no, that doesn't really make sense. That's not consistent with the decision that we've made earlier, and I'm going to use this dark spread so that we still get our pagination, but it contrasts nicely against that background. Just for simplicity, I'm just going to go back and undo and just leave it blank to match our original document. But something you could think about. Then we need our coffee making images, so that would be these four. Select all of them, and I'm just going to align them to that top corner of the page, and then one by one I will make these all the same width. And I guess actually we could use our object, transform again individually to make that the same width. Same thing with this guy, transform again individually, make that the same width. Select all of these, get them back over to that left side, and then do the same thing with the heights. I think we want these to be square, so if I copy, paste the height, now they'll all snap to the top there, and I could select all three of these. I think this should work, and then do transform again individually, and they'll all snap to that same dimension. They're all still way too big, so I'm just going to Shift Command E to center all those images, and then we can pull them apart to get our sort of process grid. And then let's see, first we need to make sure that I didn't just arbitrarily space those things out. So I'm going to use that dimension, tiny bit, but they're a little bit different. And I'm going to align along the top edge there. Now we've got a nice clean grid that is precise. They're all relatively centered, but while I've got them nice and zoomed in like this, I might just kind of center them all. Before I scale them. And then we can decide what an appropriate scale would be. Maybe that works, and then maybe I could object transform again individually. Does that? No, doesn't work. Maybe I have to actually have the image selected. Yeah, there we go. So if you actually just direct select the image, it'll work. They all seem a little low to me now, so let's see. I'm going to shift arrow key until I get, so twice works well. Try to keep it consistent. 1, 2, 1, 2. Cool. We've got our grid, reference back to our original page. They're not in the correct order, nor we actually kind of forgot one of these images, but I'm just going to leave it for now. And we will copy and paste our wonderful placeholder caption. And we will get it first aligned left, and then space it out from that image so that it's got the same consistent gap. And that is our project. So we've got those 4 spreads, 5 spreads that go from the start, the first landing page, all the way through to the end. While we're looking at this and talking about it, it is possible to link your body text so that it kind of runs consistently through. So the story could just naturally kind of spill through these text boxes and fall where it falls throughout this layout. And that's what this little sort of small box icon in the lower right-hand corner of a text box is. If I click that, you can see it kind of preloads my cursor with text. If I went and then selected this next text box, what it's going to do is create this little, it'll show this little like play icon, which means that you're actually continuing on. So like if I now went back to my original spread, and let's say I stretch this up, right, to include more text, it disappears from here, right? And this is auto size, so it's just going to automatically filter. So you can be kind of clever in the way that you string text from one to the next so that you don't actually have to like individually type out each of those sections, and it just naturally flows. But that is a full project, so I will quickly now finish out and we can do our Desco. Also, again, like feel free to just kind of move on and not watch the rest of this video, but I'm just going to finish out laying this stuff out. So a desk organizer. This is project 2. We already edited these things from the master page. This landing page borrows this nice big image across the entire spread. So I'm going to go find that image. And there it is. I'm going to drag and drop it. Let's see. We can use our shortcuts to center it within the spread. Snap it down to those bleed margins. And then make it a little bit bigger because I think it feels a little bigger. It's basically kind of equidistant. But I'm noticing now that in order to kind of have this fit our content, it's actually flipped. So what I can do is select that image, go to Object, Transform, Flip Horizontal, and just flip that image. And then this way, our nice white space for our text is on the left-hand side versus kind of taking up the space that we needed it to. So again, keep in mind when you're doing things like this, if I go to my links panel, now my effective PPI is only 219, right? But I kind of need this whole page to be clean. So maybe I'll drag this all the way to that bleed margin so that I get this thing kind of where I want it. And then, yeah, that's pretty similar to our reference document. Maybe I will move it up a little bit. But I might be okay with this. I might be okay with that effective PPI at 219. Or I might say, you know, that kind of scares me a little, so I'm going to see if I can squish this thing until maybe I get to that margin and then let go. and then I'm a little bit closer to 300. It's kind of up to you as a designer. Again, somewhere between 200 and 300, you're kind of starting to play with fire, especially with a nice big image like this that kind of relies on these crisp, clean edges to read well. But it's up to you how far you want to push the resolution of some of these things. But at least knowing what the effective PPI is and keeping that in mind, allows you to be to make more informed decisions. So I need the project number, so copy, paste in the top there. I'm going to go back and I'm going to steal this info for the project, paste it in place. I'm not going to bother editing this text to reflect this project specifically. I'm just going to use it as a visual placeholder. We need this text for our abstract. So, well, actually, before I copy that, maybe I will copy this abstract, and then I don't have to reformat that text box. If you hold Shift, Option, and Command, sort of all three modifier keys, and then you paste, then you hit V, it'll just drop it exactly where you took it from. Same as with Illustrator or other programs. So I'm going to paste that where it was. That way I just save myself kind of an alignment step. And then I'm going to copy this abstract text and edit, paste without formatting. You can see that by default, since the first word had a character style applied to it, then the whole thing now has a character style applied to it, which we really don't want, right? So I'm going to select everything except for that project name. And I'm going to go to my character styles and click none and make sure it goes back to the original paragraph style. And I think in my reference page, this was just kind of a nice clean 2-line text. So if I go back to my text frame options, I can maybe back off on some of this padding, maybe 1/2 inch on each side. Yeah, and we get a nice clean 2-line break. And then I'm just going to copy the initial text from this first project. And again, just Command Shift Option Paste to put it back in place. And I'm just going to leave that the way it is. Again, I want to center the abstract from the numeral and then the body text. So go to my Align panel. I don't have a keyboard shortcut for this, but distribute the vertical space evenly. And it's already basically in the spot that it needs to be. So that's our Desco project. We only had the landing page designed. The last one would be our Velox. So we need to go back to our pages, click this spread. You want to apply parent to pages, and we want to apply the section divider. Hit OK. So now we've got our placeholder things. Remember, we need to Shift Command click to actually edit this stuff. So I'm going to change this to the third project. Shift Command click to edit the title to Velox. Subtitle, a lightweight axe. Hit OK. And we need to add some more pages here. We kind of ran out of pages, right? So we need to say, or we could just use the plus sign to start dropping in new pages until we get to 24. I'm going to select all of these pages and just say apply parent. And we're just going to say spread so that they're not section dividers. And again, just applying those parents, we can zoom in here and see that automatically these footers are updating to reflect the previous section divider. So again, just another shout out for using parent pages and character styles and paragraph styles and all those good tools to minimize the amount of work and edits you have to make on the fly. And then the last couple pages we had here are our big hero graphic. So we'll go back to our normal document and we will find that image. Just going to use our keyboard shortcuts to center it within the spread. It's kind of pulled off to the right here, so it's taking up that right-hand space. So I'm going to first drag it as far as I can drag it without losing any of my image, and then I'm going to scale it up. Again, I should keep an eye on the links and the size of this image. We're down to 240, which I think is fine, or at least acceptable. In my opinion, I'm going to move this up a little bit to get that hand showing. Thank you, Kara. And then we need to copy in our information. So we'll copy this number. We will paste and then snap it up to the top. We need to borrow our, just going to copy all this stuff. Copy, paste in place. We need the correct abstract. Again, since the character style was applied to the first line, we need to unapply it. So we'll say none. And I don't remember less to carry. I guess in this project we highlighted the function that we were after. Less to carry. We need to change the paragraph style that's applied to these two things, right? Because now we're against a dark background. So this isn't something that a parent page is going to save you on. You know, again, this would be applied to the individual text box. So we need to go to our paragraph styles, change from opening to the opening under the inverted tab or folder. And then same thing for the rest of these. If we select the inverted body, then we get white text on a black background. And then same thing for the pagination, except this time our parent page can save us. So we're going to drag this dark spread to this page, and then we're going to drag it to this page. And then as we preview here, we've got our white pagination against this background. We got some body text that we need to also lighten up. And I believe that is that page laid out pretty much the way that we want it. And then the last thing would be to create this kind of sketch page with our demo over here on the right, and then these other two sketches that were made a long time ago on the left-hand page, which would be versatility and security. Just centering that, using the auto scale shortcut to get it to be the right size. Same thing with this, align to the bottom, align to the center, scale it down. Bottom. And then how did we handle this overlapping condition? Basically, drag to the center, and then just pull the content so that we can kind of see both of those things. Cool. All right, that is pretty much all of the content. I'm going to skip the caption there. We already did that. And this last page was just to illustrate the typographic hierarchy, which we've already looked at. So it's not something that would actually exist in the portfolio. It's just there for demonstration. So this is our content. If we enter that preview mode, we can go from this first section divider. Notice that our pagination is correct all the way through. We've got our name applied to every page. We've got running page numbers. We've got all these different kind of layers of typography, which are very consistent, right? They're using the same typeface, but applied in different ways with some different parameters at different sizes and colors and textures. So we get a nice sort of visual variety, right? Rather than one static sort of form of type. And yeah, get some nice landing pages. That's pretty much it for this video. I'm going to make one more, and that is going to tell us how to create the table of contents, which again is just automatically going to update based on where we drag and drop these different layouts and how we apply our paragraph styles. And that will be the final video in this series. So if you stuck all the way through and watched all that, you are a trooper. And we will finish up in that next video.